Since finishing my degree and coming to work at the Smithsonian, more and more of my research has stayed in Labrador. It's stayed in the Canadian Arctic, but it's centered more in what we've come to call community archaeology. I was troubled that so much of the work that archaeologists do in the north, in many ways, was similar to what had gone on in New England when I was a young man, where archaeology had become professionalized. It had distanced itself from the local community base, that had a profound and strong interest, in history and archaeology. So the work that was being done by archaeologists, the archaeologists would fly in the summer, they'd run around, they'd grab up their artifacts, and then they'd fly back and to the city, wherever they were from, and they would write their articles about what they'd found that would be in professional magazines and journals and books and publications. Very rarely did these get back to the communities, arguably whose history and heritage it was that the archaeologists were purporting to talk about. And so, also, as I started in the 1990s, when I started working at the Smithsonian, there was a devastating rash of traumatic incidents in the northern communities that I worked, where young people, depressed by the lack of employment, the lack of education opportunities, there's a rash of suicides that went on in the community that I worked on. And I had a hard time reconciling the depression and the anguish of young people with the magnificence and glory and respect that I had for their heritage and history. And so how do we reconcile that? Under the mandate of community archaeology, I thought, well, I'll go back up north and I'll go into these towns, these native villages, and talk with the community elders and the educators and say, what's going on? Is there a way that we can take people out on the land, take young people out on the land, go visit some of the sites that are significant to oral history or to the memories of the grandparents, and let's try to reconnect, this notion of heritage, history, and place, And the nice thing about the project was I went to the communities and I said, look, let's set this project up so that you can shut it down whenever you don't like what's happening. The first couple of years that I was doing this, and I would have to kind of solicit, and people in town are like, oh, I'm going to send my kids out with this crazy guy to spend a month in this, remote camp, and, who is he anyway? And by the third year of the project, by February, I'd be getting telephone calls from the kids in town saying, are you coming back up? My sister wants to work with us this summer. I got a friend. Can we go back out? Whatever. And it just caught on dramatically and fabulously successful. So not only do we do good archaeology, but also we situate that knowledge in the community, and also, we provide opportunities for young people who never realize much about academia because, schools are a dead end and a disaster often in the communities. And the idea that if you go off to college and, you get some other education, that you could come back and you could be the boss and you could run the digs. And also looking ahead, with native land claim resolution in Canada, the native community members are going to be the people that are going to be dictating archaeological practice in the future. And so they needed to have young people that were coming along in the pipeline that would be those administrators, people that knew what it was about archaeology and heritage and preservation. So our projects have been very successful, and the kids have come down here. We've worked with the collections down here. They've gone on to university, and several of them have gone on and gotten advanced degrees. So it's been a wonderful, successful program. When we're in the country traveling with the Inuit, whenever we find a stone tool, a trace of the ancestors, it's always a time of intense conversation and excitement. And as our first decision is, what do we do with it? Do we leave it here? Is this something that future generations will enjoy finding and discovering? Do we cover it back up and let it wash out again? Do we collect it? Do we take it back to the museum? Do we take it back to the community? But the next level of discussion then is sort of, well, what does it mean? You know, and the archaeologist brings certain connotations of time, or looking at the raw material, talking about settlement patterns or the level of exchange and distance, what people might have been hunting with it. It's quite an exciting moment. The sequence of arrowheads like these that we find, we bring them back to the museum. We have them in trust for future generations of scholars, of northern native peoples. And I just, I'd sort of take us back to the beginning of this conversation. And I had a quote from Thoreau's journals that I like, and I'll just share it with you. As sportsmen go in pursuit of ducks and muskrats, and scholars of rare books, and travelers of adventures, and poets of ideas, and all men of money, I go in search of arrowheads when the season comes round again. So I help myself to live worthily, loving my life as I should.